A House Full of Strangers by Emily Rhoads Johnson. Chapter 3. The Riddle. When Flora returned to the house, Polly Ann was banging on a toy xylophone in the living room while Aunt Abby watered Graham's African violets that filled the bay window. The two of them had the same pumpkin-colored hair, only Polly Ann's formed a halo of curls around her head, while Abby pulled hers back rather carelessly in a barrette at the back of her neck. Neither of them noticed Flora standing in the doorway. Flora gazed around the room where she and her grandmother had spent their evenings playing Scrabble, sewing, reading to each other, sipping cocoa in front of the fire. The furniture was patched and worn, but the room was alive with color. Red calico, pillows on the sofa, braided rugs on the floor, a fat blue jug full of cattails by the fireplace, and floor-to-ceiling bookcases, crammed with books of every size and description. When Abby turned around and saw Flora standing there, she didn't ask her where she had been. She just smiled and said, "I love African violets, don't you? The colors are so bright, like purple stars." Flora stared at the floor and didn't answer. "I'm sorry about the cup," her aunt added quietly. "Missy feels awful bad about it, too. If she hadn't been scuffling with Curtis, it wouldn't have happened. But you know Missy. She can't seem to stop her fidgeting and squirming. Seems to be part of her nature." Still Flora said nothing. "I kept the pieces for you. Wrapped 'em in an old bandana. No use trying to glue 'em together, though. All those itty-bitty slivers. Flora knew Abby was waiting for her to say something, but she didn't want to cry again, so she just nodded her head. "Would you like something to eat?" Abby asked her. "You took off so fast you never touched your pancakes." "No, thanks," Flora murmured, though her stomach was hollow as a drum. "I'll go up to my room and do some homework." "All right, honey, you run along." Flora took the bandana, full of broken china that Abby handed her, and carried it upstairs to the bedroom that she now shared with Missy. No one had asked her how she felt about that. Doreen had moved all her stuff into what used to be Graham's sewing room, no more than a cubbyhole, really. She said after sharing a room with Missy for 7 years, she deserved a room of her own, and her parents agreed. "Missy can sleep with Flora," they declared. The next thing Flora knew, they'd marched into her room and started pushing furniture around, and Missy's cot ended up in the corner where an old washstand had been. "No one uses washstands anymore," Abby had said. "We'll just haul this old thing up the attic and get it out of the way." "I use it," Flora had wanted to tell her. "I look at it. I rub my fingers over the wood sometimes because it's old and I like the way it feels. Soft, like velvet." But Flora could tell that use meant something different to the Quiggs, and she hadn't tried to explain. After closing the door that she wished now had a lock, Flora opened the top drawer of her dresser, reaching way back under her underwear, and pulled out a blue silk pouch tied with a gold cord. When she untied the cord, a small block of wood slipped into the palm of her hand. Its edges were rounded, and the wood had been polished to such a high gloss that it gleamed like satin. A tiny heart carved in the darker wood was inlaid in one corner. The block appeared to be solid, but when Flora pressed her thumb against one edge, the top slid back, revealing a hollow-out place inside, and tucked in the hollow place was a tiny folded piece of paper. Glancing nervously at the door, Flora settled herself against the pillows of her bed. Then, with the point of a straight pin, she lifted the paper out of the box. Unfolding it carefully, she read the words that her grandmother had written in small, shaky handwriting. "Tall, dark, handsome, straight they stand, many fingers on each hand. Gifts they carry, sweet and small, in chests that swing and sway, then fall. Guard them well, and love them too, for treasure they will bring to you." A month before she died, Flora's grandmother had reached under her pillow and pulled out the silk pouch which she had placed in Flora's hand. "My father carved this box for me when I was 5 years old," she told Flora. "I still remember him saying, 'A tiny box for a tiny girl,' as he laid it in my hand." Flora had felt her grandmother's thoughts travel back over the years. "Now it holds a secret, a special gift for you." Flora had kissed the old woman's wrinkled cheek, and laughed at the twinkle in her eye. "Everything in your life has a secret, Gram." But even as she said it, sadness began settling around her like snow. It hadn't taken Flora long to find the secret compartment and the hidden verses. Of course, she'd wanted to know right away what the verses meant, but Graham refused to tell her. "You're a clever girl," she said. "When the time is right, the message will be clear." When the time is right. That puzzled Flora as much as the verses. How would she know when the time was right? Would there be some kind of sign? A lightning bolt? A shape in the clouds? She wished she knew. With Graham gone, she wondered if she would ever discover the answer to the riddle. Flora folded the paper and tucked it back in the little hollow. Then she kissed the box, slipped it into the pouch, and returned it to her dresser. When a knock sounded at the door, Flora opened it reluctantly. Aunt Abby's smile was apologetic. "Flora, honey, I hate to interrupt you when you're working, but I need to go down in the cellar and do some laundry. And it would be such a help if you could watch Polly Ann for me. Last time she dumped soap powder all over the wet clothes just as I was ready to hang 'em up, and I had to wash the whole batch over again." Polly Ann darted past Flora and began pulling books off her desk and letting them drop to the floor. Abby grinned. "Looks like Polly Ann wants you to read to her," she said. I never seem to have time for that." Before Flora could think of a way to worm out of it, Abby said, "Thanks loads," and was off down the stairs, leaving Flora alone with the dreaded Polly Ann, who preferred eating books to reading them. Flora sighed. She picked up her books and piled them on a shelf where Polly Ann couldn't reach them. Polly Ann squinched up her face and started to howl. "Book!" she wailed. "Book! Want book!" Flora wasn't used to babies and didn't know what to do. She wasn't about to let Polly Ann chew up her math book, or any of her other books, for that matter. She sat in her bed and patted the spot next to her, coaxing Polly to come the way she used to coax Guffer, Graham's old collie who had died last year. "Come on, Polly," she said. "Come on up here and I'll show you something." Polly Ann didn't budge, but her howling ebbed to a snuffle. She looked at Flora. "Book," she repeated, and stuck her lower lip out as far as it would go. Flora got up and rummaged in her closet until she found a book her mother used to read to her when she was very small. The Poky Little Puppy. She held it out so that Polly Ann could see the picture of the puppy on the cover. Polly Ann sucked her lip in and grinned. "Puppy!" "Weed!" she commanded, and climbed up onto the bed next to Flora. The morning seemed endless. Flora couldn't get a lick of work done. Polly Ann kept getting into things, and Aunt Abby kept tromping up and downstairs, asking her one thing or another. After lunch, Flora went outside to weed the flower garden, and had just come in to wash up when the back door burst open. "Mama, Curtis stole my rocks!" screeched Missy, dumping her lunchbox on the kitchen table. "Did not!" Curtis retorted. "Did so, you threw them away, and I'll never find them." Curtis slammed one cupboard door after another, looking for something to eat. "They weren't good rocks anyway, bird brain. They were gravel." "They were so good rocks, they sparkled. I was going to give them to Flora." Hearing her name gave Flora a jolt. Her cousin's constant bickering made her nervous, even sick to her stomach, and she tried to shut it out by not listening. But Missy insisted on dragging her into things, like now telling Curtis those rocks were for her. Why would Missy want to give her a bunch of rolled rocks anyway? Aunt Abby appeared in the doorway when Polly Ann thrashing like a fish in her arms. "How many times have I told you all to come in quietly," she scolded them, "so you won't wake Polly from her nap? Now we'll have to put up with her being cranky till bedtime." "Curtis stole my rocks," Missy tattled to her mother. Abby ignored her. "Doreen, put that fruit jello right back in the fridge. It's for supper, and don't touch the tapioca pudding either." "Well, for cripe's sakes, what can we eat around here?" Doreen complained. "Here, have a banana." Curtis tossed her one at her. "It's rotten, like you." "Ha ha, very funny," said Doreen, catching it and stuffing it down his shirt. Missy clamped her hands in the back of a chair and started jumping up and down like a cricket. The heels of her cowboy boots clattered against the linoleum. "Look, Mama, look, Doreen. See my shadow on the floor? See how it looks like a giraffe when I jump real high?" Nobody looked. Missy kept jumping. "Look, now it's a monster with horns. It gets bigger and smaller and bigger again." She kicked her leg in the air and knocked a glass of milk out of Doreen's hand. The glass didn't break, but milk sloshed from one end of the kitchen to the other. "Honestly, Missy, somebody ought to lock you up." Doreen grabbed a dish towel and dangled it in front of her. "Now get busy and mop up that mess. We're about out of milk as it is." Missy knelt on the floor and swished the towel through the puddles. Then suddenly she stopped and gazed up at Flora with the biggest eyes Flora had ever seen, like pools you could fall right into. "Do shadows have shadows?" she asked her solemnly. "Ignore her," Curtis advised. "She asks dumb questions all the time. Don't answer her." "But I want to know," Missy persisted. Flora deliberated a moment, then said, "I don't think shadows have shadows, Missy." "Why don't they?" Missy demanded. Because there's nothing really there, I guess. Shadows are just shadows. See, I told you. Curtis was trying to balance an orange on his finger. Talking to her is like talking to a chipmunk. If I'm a chipmunk, then you're a baboon, Missy sassed back. Flora was getting a headache. She turned to leave, but Missy caught her around the ankle. I'm sorry I broke your cup, Flora. Missy, let go of my leg. I'm really, really, really sorry. I'll get super glue and stick the pieces together and make it just like it was. Missy, let go of me. Flora shook her leg so hard that she kicked Missy's chin. Missy let out a yelp and released Flora's leg. I'll fix it like new, she shouted as Flora ran out the door. I will, I promise.